Good morning, eighth graders. So we are going to be starting our water cycle and precipitation assessment. So because there are so many standards with this unit, I kind of wanted to break it up a little bit so that you weren't just like slammed with all of them at the very end. So this is the water cycle poem, children's story, stop motion, puppet show assessment. It can essentially be a little bit of whatever you want it to be. So, your background. The water cycle is an extremely important part of Earth and its ability to support life. Without the water cycle, we wouldn't be here. So Earth recycles and reuses its water continuously, which is why it is called a cycle. It also has a significant role in our weather. So we started talking about that a little bit when it was catastrophic event weather edition, but we're going to get more into that as we progress through. So your assignment is you will be writing a poem or a children's story or creating a stop motion show or writing and performing a puppet show about the water cycle. There are so many different ways you can actually present this information. You will need to include information to teach someone about the necessary parts as well as how they are all connected. You may also want to include other information about weather and environmental issues related to the water cycle. My goal with this is essentially you're going to present it to a younger set of learners. So for this, we have to understand some things that ELA has taught us. There are two different ways in which you can actually write your poem or story or whatever. Two different types of perspectives you can take. So you can either do this in first person point of view, where you are the character progressing through the cycle. Or you can be the narrator, sort of that third person omniscient sort of like, and then this did that and all that kind of stuff. I do have examples of some of Will's favorite children's books that he no longer reads, but either way, they'll be available to you as kind of like a, here's how you write to a younger learner. So you must include the following terms and processes within your poem or story, skit, whatever. Okay. Condensation, evaporation, precipitation, runoff, solar energy. Okay. If you throw something in there about transpiration as well, icing on the cake. How the water cycle influences our weather, so bringing on storms, fog, flooding, etc. And then you will also be presenting your poem. Now, due to timing, it might be in person, or it will be a recording of you either going through the skit or reading the story or poem, things like that. These are 6 different types of poem styles if you choose to go poem style. So a haiku versus a free verse, a cinquain versus an epic, a ballad versus a sonnet. These are just different sorts of ideas. Now I will say by doing say like a haiku or a cinquain or a sonnet, you're very much limiting yourself because you are only allowed so many syllables. And most of the words I want you to say are multi-syllable words, or you're limited to how many lines and things like that. Iambic pentameter, you can totally talk to your ELA teacher, but that's like the, okay, it kind of has a rhythm to it that kind of keeps going. So you're welcome to try, but I would say that people who have tried these 3 in particular have not necessarily scored the best that they could score. So one of my favorite podcasts is SciShow Tangents. It is produced by Hank Green, and this is the same guy who does the SciShow Kids, Crash Course Science, all that kind of fun stuff. So during this podcast, they start every episode with a scientific poem all about their topic. So I am going to have Stephen Chin read his own poem from the podcast all about fossils.
Now, as always, we introduce this week's science topic with a traditional science poem from Stefan.
All over the world, even in the yard behind your home, you could potentially find a rock that used to be a bone, or it might have been a plant, a tooth, or just poop. I mean, we've even found some bits of fossilized puke. Most of the species that have ever lived are now gone, and only a fraction of those have left their clues in the rock. But from those, we've learned about things millions of years in the past, like that tentacled sea cucumber that looks like something out of Lovecraft. Now, fossilization isn't quite like Han Solo getting trapped in carbonite. There are a few ways it can happen, but the conditions have to be just right for the remains of an organism to be preserved for such a long time, to eventually allow us to discover the Tully monster, Sue, and so many trilobites. And it would be kind of cool to travel all the way back to see some of these creatures in their natural habitat. But then again, looking at the size of the teeth we found lying around, I guess I'm glad the only T-Rexes I know were dug up from the ground.
So, he goes through a lot of the basic sorts of information about how fossilization works, how we have found so many different types of things, all that kind of fun stuff. So I really enjoyed that one. Then here is another example from Sam Schultz on the same show, but it's all about natural disasters and meteorological natural disasters. So I'm going to have him read his own.
Now, as always, we introduce this week's science topic with the traditional science poem, this week from Sam.
Our planet is a writhing mass of magma, water, rock, and gas. And sometimes these things conspire to make weather that is dire. Waters rise and breach their shores, or from the sky a cyclone roars. Lightning can ignite a forest, hail can fall in massive torrents. Even space has its share of threats. Ask the dinos, they'll tell you, I bet. And as people impact the Earth, it seems some weather is getting worse and hurting people everywhere. So maybe it's time for certain people to care?
Not the smoothest of endings, but still gets the same point across. So those are a couple examples of poems. Here's like third-ish sort of options. So like we didn't really talk about children's books because I have children's books available to you. So then poems, stop motion. Stop motion is going to take time, but the results can be outstanding. So stop motion, period, if we were just to define it, is an animated filmmaking technique in which objects are physically manipulated in small increments. So individual photos are taken. After each manipulation, the photos are then strung together and appear seamless and show the entire movement of the object. Think of a flip book. Okay, so you're flipping the book and you see this picture kind of go about. That's stop motion. So this is just an example using M&Ms and whatnot. So if you wanted to do stop motion, this is an example. And then puppet shows. So puppet shows, I just want to say I'm not exactly thinking Sesame Street. What I'm more so thinking is like the dramatic play. So usually a puppet show is a dramatic performance staged with puppets with a dialogue and music provided by the puppeteers. But puppet shows have kind of evolved as we have evolved as species. Yes, you can have the doll-like puppets like Sesame Street, or just playing with toys. If you have younger siblings, I witness will do this all the time. They're giving little voices to their little action figures and all this or whatever. That is a puppet show. So that could be another option. I will link all these extra videos into Schoology so you have examples. But these are just two different examples of puppet shows. First one, like I said, it's a kid who's playing, his dad as well, with a couple of like motorcycle guys. And then the other one's a little bit more about like Sesame Street and the puppet making and things like that. I don't care if you glue some googly eyes on a sock. You do what works best for you. Final thing I want to show you is the grading rubric. So in order to be proficient, first things first is you can't have any missing necessary terminology. So that would include condensation, evaporation, precipitation, runoff, and solar energy, sun, something along those lines. State how the weather cycle influences weather. So if you can tell me at least one way that it influences weather, that can get you a 3. But if you're able to tell me more than one way, that's a potential 4. Style of poem or children's story, stop motion, whatever. There have been some adjustments. The style of poem or children's story, puppet show, whatever, is very easily known and recognizable. It needs to be something that when you were to show it to an audience, they would understand what you're trying to say. And then that 4 would be you add some characteristic to it. So whether it is actual puppets or you are able to integrate a couple different styles within, whatever. Okay, and then presentation, you either present it or you don't. Okay, so if you present it to an audience in any manner, this could be physically, this could be digitally recorded, whatnot. Okay, so that's what's going on. If you have any questions, there's a lot of options, which means there's still a lot of gray area. If you have any questions, please ask your teacher. We are here to help. We want to help, I promise. And yeah, fantastic. Questions, comments, concerns, let us know. Thank you so much, 8th graders.